Greetings and welcome there, academic proletariat, to this very special edition of the Fireside Chats, Thanksgiving edition, where we will discuss how in the heaven you tell the difference between a pilgrim and a Puritan. So if you're in my class, you're going to want to take notes on this. Your notes are going to want to look like this. The classic Venn diagram situation here, where we try and talk about the differences between the Pilgrims and the Puritans, but then also the similarities that causes us to so often get them confused. So there is going to be an extra credit opportunity here. You're going to want to take notes like this, show them to me, and then you'll be able to earn your extra points if you watch the video in honor of Thanksgiving. Okay, so here's some sticking points. First, it's essential that we understand that Pilgrims and Puritans are not the same thing, contrary to what your third grade teacher might have told you, but it's also important that you understand that this info, while interesting and while semi-important for some reasons, is not essential. It's especially not essential for the AP test. Pilgrims are not something that the College Board is going to readily ask you about, so you don't necessarily have to remember this presentation word for word. However, Puritans are very important for the AP test because they become sort of the linchpin of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which is one of the first colonies that helps establish America. So know that from the get-go, but however, I do want you to realize that knowing both of these groups is important for being an American because there's a lot of myth built around the two groups. So without further ado, here we go. First of all, you need to know some historical context. You need to understand that the Church of England had been set up by King Henry VIII after he wasn't allowed to divorce his wives and was eventually excommunicated by the Pope, set up his own church called the Church of England, and which he became the leader of. So the Church of England was more a political entity than it was a religious one. However, over the years it has stuck. And the monarch sort of oversaw the church, which made him a divine type of a person on earth. However, really, like I said, it was more of a political thing. So that's the backdrop religiously. Now, politically, the backdrop is English settlement in the New World. I want to emphasize that Jamestown was the first permanent English settlement in America. It was in Virginia. It was not in Massachusetts. And the people went there mostly to make money. I don't want you to think that all people came for religious freedom. That was not the case. Okay, mostly to make money, people came to the New World. The Pilgrims are going to be the exception. Notice, I did not say the Puritans, I said the Pilgrims. Okay, so let's start talking about these Pilgrims. So what do you need to know about them? Well, they're a group of English separatists, and what this means is that they're super radical Protestants who want to separate from the Church of England. They envision a brand new church, one that is totally revamped and is separated from the Church of England, the one that King Henry VIII thought up after he wasn't able to divorce his wives. Okay, so they believe that one can achieve salvation through individual faith. So they are a group akin to the message that we are going to hear about in the first Great Awakening. They don't approve of the church hierarchy, so that means that they are against this priest, bishop, pope thing that the Catholic Church has set up, but also they emphasize reading the Bible. So they're very, very strict Protestants. Now, they try to set up a congregation in England, however, it doesn't go very well, so they eventually leave England to avoid that Church of England, which they didn't think was holy enough, and they move to Holland. Now, this is interesting because people don't usually hear about them moving from Holland. We just hear about them coming over from England. Well, they move to Holland and they quickly realize that they don't want to stay there. They don't want their children to speak Dutch, and they think that their children are becoming too Dutch-like. So, what do you do when that happens? Well, you seek asylum in the New World. In addition to that, the 30 Years' War, which pitted the Catholic Spanish against the Dutch, who were fighting each other, concerned the Pilgrims because they thought that if the Spanish were able to take over the Netherlands, then they would be forced to adopt Catholicism, which was even worse than the Church of England. So the Puritans seek some investors. They round up enough funds to finance a trip to the New World. 150 of them travel on the Mayflower to America. Now, initially, they want to settle in the very northern part of Virginia, which is basically the southern part of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, right around New York. However, when they're coming over, they get blown wildly off course, and they land in Plymouth, Massachusetts instead, which is a little bit north of New York, and they unfortunately arrive in the middle of winter. Now, when the ship arrives and it's sort of offshore anchored, this is when the people on board the Mayflower drop the Mayflower Compact, which is a broad idea for government, sort of the first government charter in American history, which makes it sort of a big deal, but really it's not that big of a deal because, capitalism takes over. But anyways, so they arrive in the middle of the winter. They don't bring a lot of food, which means a lot of their people die, and only 50 pilgrims survive the first winter. So that's a survival rate of about 33%. That's not good, so we got to figure out something to do. So what do those Puritans do? Well, like all white people, they rely on the Indians to survive. So they make an alliance with the local Wampanoag tribe, and this is where they run into Squanto, who was a member of a tribe that had been wiped out due to disease prior to the Pilgrims getting there, and Squanto was the only person left in his tribe, so he allied with the other Wampanoags, but Squanto knew English from other English-speaking people that had gotten there before the Pilgrims. Surprise, surprise. Anyways, he was able to translate for the Pilgrims, and they were able to overcome that very harsh first winter, and in repayment, they have the first Thanksgiving, in quotes. Now, this first Thanksgiving wasn't so much to be thankful that they had so much stuff, it was to be thankful that they did not die. That first winter was so harsh, in fact, that they propped up dead bodies against trees in order to keep would-be invaders away. Though not only were there that many dead bodies, but they were that concerned with invaders. It was just a total mess. Now, these pilgrims, when they came to the New World, they obviously wanted religious freedom for themselves, but not anybody else. So anybody who came after them, who didn't aspire to be pilgrims, would not be welcomed. Now, in the long run, the Pilgrims are going to be absorbed by the Massachusetts Bay Colony in the mid-1690s after the Glorious Revolution, and that's going to sort of spell doom to their settlement. Their settlement was never really that big. However, it plays a big role in our psyche and in our sort of American mythological culture because we think that they came over here in search of religious freedom and flourished right away. No, they came over here kind of in search of religious freedom, but they just wanted to be separated from everybody else. They definitely didn't want to start a utopia. But then in addition to that, they most certainly didn't allow religious freedom for anybody else, and they did not flourish right away. Had it not been for the Native Americans, they would have been dead. So, quick little review on the Pilgrims. They are separatists, and this is this kind of thing that makes them different than the Puritans, as it says on the screen. They're separatists, not Congregationalists, which the Puritans were. They came here first. They settled in Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1620. Most of them died. Almost the entire colony died. They survived on an alliance with the Native Americans, and they had the first Thanksgiving, where they were thankful for not being dead. Think about that during your Thanksgiving. Okay, let's move on to the Puritans. So the background of the Puritans is this. They're moderately radical Protestants. So they're people who want to purify the Anglican Church, not separate from it. They tolerated church hierarchies, and they were okay with local ministers to oversee the church that then would speak to God on behalf of the congregation. However, they also were opposed to the Catholic-style bishop-priest hierarchy. They were a fairly large and influential group in England. Most of them were very wealthy, including John Winthrop, who was going to be their leader, was a lawyer in England. So he had plenty of money in order to finance a new trip, unlike those Pilgrims that really had barely any money, and they had to round up investors to pay for them to go. Okay, so anyways, when they come to the New World, they carefully plan a trip. They come out with 17 ships and 1,000 people. Now, review back to the Pilgrims, who came with one ship, a piece of crap, and 150 people. Okay? The Puritans, much more planned out when they come here. They land in Salem, Massachusetts, near modern-day Boston, and they land in the middle of spring with plenty of rations. Kind of how the Pilgrims wish it would have been. Now, in the New World, the Puritans become the linchpin of the Massachusetts Bay Colony because, people. When they got there, though, they were instructed by those helping them plan the trip in England. They were told to seek out the Pilgrims. Now, they were also encouraged not to bother the Pilgrims, and when they got there, they copied the Pilgrim business model, which was based upon trapping beaver fur in order to make money. So if it hadn't have been for those Pilgrims, the Puritans might have had more tough of a time. Anyways, when they got set up, the Puritans set up large communities with churches and schools and town halls at the center. They expanded very, very quickly because the northern climate kept disease away, and they brought enough women, children, and families in order to facilitate new families. Main differences the Puritans have from the Pilgrims is, well, they're Congregationalists. They wanted to purify, not separate from the Church of England. They were definitely more successful in terms of population and economic goals because, they made money and had more people than when they started, and they were not as reliant on the Native Americans as indicated by the massive uprising of Wampanoags against the Puritans in 1675, known as King Philip's War. Most importantly, the Puritans did not have Thanksgiving. Okay, and then finally, let's talk about the similarities between the two. Both of them were English, and they both had negative views of the monarch. They both sought to change in some way the Anglican Church, and they both hated Catholics. So with regard to politics and religion, they're similar, but definitely not the same. They both settled in Massachusetts, and they both wore boring black clothes. However, only one had Thanksgiving, and that would be the Pilgrims. Actually, people say that the first Thanksgiving was in Virginia, but I guess we're never going to know. All right, that's all the time we have. See you later. Happy Thanksgiving. And remember, put cranberry sauce on everything.